So in my previous Blade videos, I explained what it takes to build vampire hybrid level strength and never-ending physical endurance. But strength and endurance alone doesn't cut it when taking on entire hordes of vampires. Today we're going to put all those pieces together: strength, speed, power, and that sharp tactical efficiency that lets Blade mow through crowds without wasting a move. So as promised and long overdue, this is chapter 3 of my Blade series. This will be the full Blade workout, but not just his strength and conditioning. No, that will not do. We're going to see how he'd efficiently divide his time between strength, power work, endurance work, and that all-important combat efficiency. This isn't about training to survive. This is training to make sure they don't. We'll go through a sample week that includes everything Blade would need: explosive power, quick transitions, and those cold, calculated moves that finish a fight before it even starts. Now, in the first video, I went through how to develop all the different types of strength that Blade would need to overpower vampires. Then, in the second video, I covered Blade's insane stamina and capacity to fight or run down enemies without gassing out after the first couple of swings, and how he could build on his already superhuman level of conditioning using a combination of aerobic work, interval training, and some tactical endurance strategies. So now that we've laid the groundwork, we're going to get into the comprehensive training plan for Blade, one that combines strength, endurance, power, and combat efficiency into one badass program. And watch through to the end, because we're going to be wrapping up with a full training plan that'll make you feel like you could take down a gang of vampires. But before we get to what Blade's sample week of training looks like, we have to go into and examine the parts of his training that make him dangerous, not just strong and fit. So let's get into it. Blade's fights are fast, explosive, and require bursts of power that he can repeat again and again over a long brawl. We already reviewed some of the power training in the first video when I talked about things like dynamic and explosive strength. But while dynamic strength is often associated with moving loads quickly, it doesn't push the body to its max velocity potential in the way that alactic power work does. When you're building dynamic strength, you may be moving a moderate or even a heavy load with speed, but you're not maximizing pure power force output. In contrast, alactic power is about generating full force with little to no load or moderate resistance, focusing entirely on speed, acceleration, and explosiveness. When we're talking about true explosive or alactic power to make you dangerous, we're dealing with a very specific type of energy system and a very specific goal: generating maximum force in the shortest amount of time. This is different from simply lifting weights explosively or building dynamic strength. So to be a little more clear about it, alactic power refers to the ability to generate short bursts of maximal force without relying on oxygen or the presence of lactic acid. The energy comes directly from the ATP-PCR system, which fuels movements that only last for a few seconds, typically under 10. This is why it's so critical in high-impact, short-duration activities, such as sprints, jumps, or explosive strikes. True power training isn't about the load, but the speed and force of the movement. You're not grinding through heavy weights. You're delivering as much force as possible, as fast as possible, whether it's jumps, throws, or rapid striking movements to replicate what happens in a fight. True alactic power enhances the ability to create instantaneous maximal force output. It's the difference between throwing a fast punch, which is like dynamic strength, and throwing the hardest punch of your life in a split second. Blade needs to develop this explosive power in all planes of motion. Rotational power, think about striking or sword slashing. Lateral power, moving side to side, cutting and dodging. Linear power, closing distance with a sprint or a leap. And unilateral power, exploding off one leg or throwing a punch with one arm. Let's get into the details. To train alactic power properly, you need to be strategic. You need specific methods that prioritize speed, velocity, and high force output, like I've said over and over. Here are a few key methods: plyometrics and jump training. This is one of the purest form of alactic power work. Explosive jumps like depth jumps or box or hurdle jumps train the body to create maximum force quickly. Throws and slams using a medicine ball or a light sandbag. Rotational tosses and throws are key here. These can replicate the force and speed required in striking or grappling movements. These are the rotational power needed in many sports and in martial arts. Sprints and explosive sled work. These target linear acceleration and maximum speed. Sled pushes or drags done with maximal speed and minimal load are excellent for developing linear alactic power. Rotational and lateral movements. Blade, as a combat athlete, would need not just to develop linear power, but rotational and lateral power, moving explosively from side to side or generating force while twisting. You can use dynamic rotational med ball throws and tosses, once again, along with lateral bounding and cable or band rotational chops. Bilateral to unilateral movements. To round out alactic power development, you need a blend of bilateral or two-limb exercises like broad jumps, and unilateral, single-limb movements like single-leg hops and jumps or split-stance rotational throws. Bilateral work focuses on maximum force output, while unilateral work ensures you're explosive in any position or stance, just like Blade would need to be. The goal isn't just to be strong or even fast, it's to be explosively fast in every direction, with the ability to generate fight-ending power in an instant. But we can't stop here. We need to also develop alactic capacity, which is the ability to repeat and sustain high-intensity explosive efforts over and over without significant drop-off in performance. It's crucial for activities that demand repeated bursts of maximal power, like sprinting, striking, or powerful movements in combat. If alactic power is the ability to generate maximum force quickly, alactic capacity is your ability to repeat the same level of explosiveness over several bouts. Imagine Blade fighting through a gang of bloodsuckers. If he can only throw one or two powerful punches or sword strikes before fatiguing, he's done. With high alactic capacity, he can continue delivering knockout blows or lethal strikes repeatedly. So how could he train this? Through any means where he can repeatedly do high velocity, maximum effort, explosive movement repeatedly with controlled rest periods that allow for partial recovery. So some examples would be sprints or sled sprints for 6 to 10 seconds with something like 15 to 30 seconds rest. Repeat rotational medicine ball throws against the wall for 8 to 10 reps with that same 15 to 30 second rest. Explosive broad jumps or lightly weighted squat jumps for 3 to 6 jumps with the same rest interval. These could all be done for 4 to 8 rounds. He could also do striking bursts on a heavy bag for 8 to 10 seconds of non-stop maximal effort striking with the same rest intervals I mentioned and for the same number of rounds. Alright, on to Blade's martial arts training. While I do practice martial arts, I'm not an instructor and I don't claim to be an expert, but I do understand training demands, so we'll focus more on how he'd split time between different martial arts training. To keep it simple, we're going to break it down into 3 categories rather than styles, because there's not enough time to go into all the specific types that he'd know and train. These 3 categories are empty hand striking, grappling, and weapons training. The key to Blade's success is how efficiently he moves between these 3, always optimizing his energy expenditure and agility. But with a finite amount of time to train everything and do his strength and conditioning work, Blade would need to prioritize and manage his time very carefully. My take? Blade would spend only about 30% of his time on empty hand striking drills. Getting caught up in hand-to-hand combat will only slow him down and make it that much easier for the vampires to beat him. But he would need to practice fast, powerful, and efficient strikes to put down vampires when weapons aren't immediately available. As for grappling, this is where I think he'd probably dedicate the least amount of time to training. Around 10%. I'm not saying he wouldn't drill clinch work, guards, and escapes, and control, but rolling around and wrestling too much with a vampire is a bad idea, especially when there's more than one. He may be immune to vampire bites, but I can't imagine it feels good, and he would take on too much damage after multiple bites. The bulk of his time would be spent on weapons training, something like 60%, because he needs to very quickly and efficiently cut through entire gangs of vampires as they come at him from all directions. Plus, his name is Blade, after all. Okay, so next let's talk about training strategies to improve fighting ability. Blade would need agility, adaptability, and fluid movements in martial arts. So training would center on mastering the attributes to handle multiple enemies and react quickly to unexpected situations. And this isn't just physical, it's about sharp decision making under pressure. Blade's practice would center on scenario-based combat, unpredictable situations where he responds to multiple opponents, environmental obstacles, and quick changes, all while staying in complete control. Here's how Blade could put those training concepts into action. Dynamic combat flow. To maintain fluidity, Blade could do something like shadow sparring, transitioning seamlessly between strikes and weapons without a partner, building precision and adaptability. Mixing this with parkour drills as well, like running vaults, wall runs, and monkey vaults, would boost his ability to move through urban settings, improving his ability to get from point A to point B while maintaining awareness of his surroundings and weapons. This combination of agility and situational awareness keeps Blade efficient and deadly. High-intensity parkour drills can also improve his cardiovascular endurance, while refining his ability to quickly navigate through tight spaces or crowded areas. Agility training for Blade would not just focus on footwork or speed, but on constant adaptability. He would practice changing directions, levels, and angles during combat to stay one step ahead of his enemies. This can include, but isn't limited to, dynamic footwork drills, tactical mobility, and complex coordination training with martial flow. Dynamic footwork drills can include ladder drills and cone drills, but with unpredictable changes in direction to mimic the chaos of real-world fighting. A training partner could call out sudden changes in movements mid-drill. For instance, while Blade sprints towards one cone, the partner might shout for him to sidestep or pivot to a different cone, challenging his ability to react and adjust on the fly. Tactical mobility. Agility isn't just speed, but the ability to slow down, stop, and redirect instantly. For Blade, this can mean evading an enemy's attack and countering with a quick and efficient strike. So he could do something like an angle step drill used by many fighters to evade and counter. Moving around a bag or a partner at 45-degree angles is ideal. Practice pivoting to keep a direct line for a counterattack. Martial flow sounds dramatic. This is about maintaining constant movement and keeping attacks unpredictable. Blade's training would focus on flowing from one attack or defense into the next, using Bruce Lee's concept of intercepting the opponent's movements. Blade would practice transitioning from one martial arts discipline to another with fluidity. For instance, empty hand striking to weapon flow. He would train combinations of striking, switching seamlessly to drawing a weapon. He needs to practice flowing between movements, which Blade would then apply by never letting one technique stop before another begins. He'd also need weapon handling drills, practicing flow drills from Eskrima or Kali to transition smoothly from one weapon to the next without breaking rhythm. For Blade, weapons are an extension of his body. He'd use flow drills with swords and knives to practice smooth transitions from defensive to offensive moves while constantly keeping his weapons in motion. Okay, so finally, after much rambling, as promised, the training week itself. First, here's the weekly breakdown. This is how Blade would split his time between all the different parts of his training. Day 1 would be all about strength and power. Jumps, plyos, and med ball tosses first, plus a heavy lifting session. He'd start the week with strength and explosive work because the nervous system is fresh and ready for maximal power output. Day 2 is about endurance and power development, focusing first on alactic capacity work, short explosive intervals of striking, med ball work, or resistance sprints, keeping that 6 to 10 second work, 15 to 30 second rest scheme we discussed earlier. Then moving to aerobic capacity work with some steady state effort for at least 20 minutes, doing something like tempo runs, rucking, or easy shadow boxing. Following a strength and power day with endurance and alactic work builds complementary systems and spreads out the physical demand of sprint and striking-based drills. The easy aerobic work can also help aid in recovery. Day 3 is dedicated to martial arts with tactical efficiency and weapons training. The focus is on weapons training, using both long and short swords. You would do combat drills with an emphasis on tactical mobility and footwork drills. Consolidating weapons-based training after a lighter day allows for a focus on skill acquisition without heavy fatigue, which is why we'd put this after day 2. Now, day 4 would be a little more stressful in terms of strength and conditioning. We got strength, lactic conditioning, and weapon flow drills. First comes the secondary lifting, compound lifts, and unilateral exercises. Then comes lactic conditioning, high-intensity intervals like sprint intervals, parkour practice, or striking and wrestling drills with 30 to 60 seconds of effort, followed by 30 to 60 seconds for rest for multiple sets. Weapons flow drills can be done at the end with similar work to rest ratios, but with a focus on fluid transitions. The idea on this day is to group the secondary strength day with stressful lactic conditioning instead of doing these on separate days in order to manage fatigue throughout the week and allow for recovery, so that this type of training routine can be repeated each week without him burning out. The lifting on this day is also less demanding than on day 1 to complement the skill-based weapon flow drills. Day 5 is focused on martial arts again, but with empty hand striking. Striking combinations focus on speed and precision. Focusing on precision and agility in martial arts this day reinforces striking skills without taxing power or strength systems. Day 6 is all about that weird shit I mentioned, combat efficiency and tactical training. This would involve simulated combat or sparring against multiple opponents and scenario-based high-pressure drills, building off the previous day's striking work. Blade would train situational awareness under stress with tactical simulations as previously described. Day 7 would just be focused on recovery and optional combat drills. So he could do something like yoga, if a vampire hunter does that, or mobility, and maybe light weapons practice to recover and refine skills. Blade may not get this done each week because he does have to slay vampires after all, and it's also not necessary. But a day like this would help him recover while refining technique and maintain mobility for the coming week. A schedule like this optimizes training flow, combat skill work, and manages fatigue from all the competing physical demands in a way that maximizes the effectiveness. Now, I know this plan includes a lot of martial arts training. After all, we're talking about Blade, but I do recommend martial arts to everyone for the athletic coordination it develops. That said, if you're just here for the strength and conditioning and want to give this a try, you can skip the martial arts or replace it with another activity that builds coordination and athleticism, like playing basketball or skateboarding, whatever you enjoy. What I gave you so far is just an outline of what to do each day. So if you want the details of what lifts, drills, and exercises to do with intensity and volumes, here it is. You can pause this or click on the link in the description below to see a copy of it. So there you have it, a comprehensive training plan for Marvel's Daywalker, Blade. It's a mix of raw strength, explosive power, endurance, combat proficiency, and tactical efficiency. Put it all together and you've got a vampire hunter who doesn't tire, doesn't miss, and doesn't leave any loose ends. Now, do I recommend you go and try to become a vampire hunter? Yes, but even if you don't and you're just looking for a real world superhero level training plan, give this a try. And hey, you might just get fit enough to survive your next apocalyptic vampire outbreak, just in case. So let me know in the comments if you like this and you want to give it a try, and I'd really appreciate it if you like and share this, and I'll see you next time that shine my light in the sky.